The first thing I wanted to jump into is one of my favorites, which is always the Cutler cast. Always has some great guests. And this one in particular, because this guy probably, along with the old school era guys like Arnold, got me into bodybuilding, inspired me to want to compete. Labrada as well, but Danny Hester especially, because we're, again, the same height. He was a natural competitor at the time, and he weighed about the same as me. And when I first saw him in the magazines, I thought, this is what I want to look to. So not surprisingly, Danny won the Classic Physique Mr. Olympia in 2016 at the age of 47. And this interview covers Danny's long history in bodybuilding and fitness. One of the quotes, just to kind of kick it off, is I like how he says that it was like being a classic car with very low mileage when he won the Olympia, because he didn't put a lot into, all the drug issues and stuff like that. So he could win it even at that advanced age. What did you think of the episode anyway?
I really, really enjoyed this one. And definitely, I, like you, I'm a fan of Danny Hester. And just remember him on so many magazine covers. It was just outrageous how many he was on. So nearly every second cover. But yeah, everyone aspired to look like that. He definitely had a classic look. But I was there in 2016, just behind the press pit, just behind David Bay, watching that particular show that Danny was in, the first classic Mr. Olympia. And Danny looked awesome. The other guys were a lot taller than him, but he was grainy and he was probably in the best condition he's ever been in. And I remember when he won, David Bay was, fist pumping. He was obviously a bit biased, and I was. And I said to David, that's a great result, David. And he said, yeah, that's awesome, So we're both sort of around about Danny's age. He was 47, and I was just over 50. So it was chalk one up for the old guys. But by jingoes, he looked fantastic, and it was great. It was great to see that. And then going to Venice Beach, and seeing his pictures up in the gym there, and then seeing him at the Olympia was quite surreal. So to watch this interview with Jay, and Jay did it very well, was just a joy, and it felt like we were reliving some of the golden era with him, because Danny was right there, wasn't he, the whole time?
Yeah, that's right, because he was a pretty prominent face at Gold's Gym in Venice in the 1990s. And as he said, he was always training right alongside with the top bodybuilders like Flex Wheeler and Chris Cormier of the day. He was quite often one of their offsiders when it came to preparation in the hotel rooms and always helping them out. He had a really extensive amateur career before even turning pro. But what kind of got me is he started out as a pretty high-ranking breakdancer. And as Australians have shown, we really take pride in our breakdancers. That's a joke there. But yeah, he also had that martial artist background. He seems to have dabbled in a lot of different things. And so bodybuilding, he said, came to a little bit easy to him. But yeah, he had that successful career as a fitness model, supplement spokesperson before even dabbling into the pro ranks. And that's where I saw him on all the covers of the magazines. And I thought, yeah, that's what I want to look to. But it's amazing also, he also had a couple of appearances in films. I remember seeing him in Hot Shots, because he was Charlie Sheen's trainer, I think, back in the day. I'm not sure if he trained Van Damme or if he just trained with him, but he was definitely Mickey Rourke's trainer. So he's definitely rubs shoulders with a lot of the big names, not just in the acting field, but also bodybuilding as well. One of the points that Danny did make was about the evolution of the Classic Physique division, because it's interesting, because he was the first winner, like you said, in 2016. But since then, we've only had 3 winners. So it shows Bumstead's reign and just the evolution, because we've also gone from those ridiculous shorts to the more, appropriate briefs, I think. But he dislikes it in the way that it's evolved to reward not only more size, but that sweeping leg development, which he doesn't really like as a Classic Physique. What did you think about that comment?
We've definitely seen this, the big thigh sweeps coming in. And back in the day, and he went back. In fact, they spoke of Arnold and Frank Zane, whose legs were much more slender, and that they preferred that as the classic shape. Danny, in particular, was sort of a bit disillusioned with the way the guys are looking, and how that it seems to be all about structure, and you've got to be tall and wide now, and then, like I say, with the quads. So, yeah. And it soon became that way, didn't it? I mean, Danny had that win for that first year, and then there was it after that. It changed to the taller man, and so Wesley Vissers is definitely the heir apparent, isn't he? So,
Yeah, well, it seems like
Wesley's,
maybe the shorter, lighter bodybuilders in that division are never going to get a look in ever again. You know, the
yeah,
Breons,
and
the Rough
that's
Diesels,
right.
etc. They're just not going for that look. They're definitely going for the taller guy, which was my kind of knock on the evolution of the division as well.
Mm.
It's more genetically predetermined than, say, the Open Olympia because they take all sizes and shapes in that one, as long as you're just a freak and a monster. But
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Terence
it's funny.
Terence has had a year off, hasn't he? Just to, because he just feels like he just can't get a look in at the moment. So he's going to, he might come back next year, maybe. I don't know. So
yeah, and it was funny that you mentioned, Arnold and the older guys, because I thought it was an interesting clanger coming from Jay himself, a bit of a self-professed historian and lover of the sport as well. But he mentioned pumping iron and Serge Nubret competing against Arnold Schwarzenegger in that 75 Olympia. And I thought the clanger was that he mentioned it was a two-man show, and perhaps, and Danny said so as well, that Serge Nubret should have won. And of course, we know that there was no fucking way that was the case, because Serge had detrained there for quite a few months, or a few weeks or months anyway, because he was out of the contest, and it was only the 11th hour that let him back in. So there was no way that it was even physically comparable to Arnold. But not only that, Jay said it was a two-man show, but you forgot about Lou Ferrigno, which I thought it was an obvious inclusion that he's missed out.
Yeah, that's right. But even if you look back at even someone like Serge Nubret's legs, they were a lot more slender back then. So that's.
It wasn't an X frame back then, was it? You know how we talk about that?
No, it was a Y frame. It really was a Y frame. There was
the legs had the de-emphasis.
Yeah. So this is why Wesley Business has got a bit of a shot if they want to sort of go back to that sort of a look, because Wesley hasn't got the balloon-like quads, but he's definitely got that classic shape. It's a very big Y frame, isn't it? So
we can't really call it classic, can we? Because it's just such a misnomer. Because the original intention, like I think I brought up in a previous episode, is when the IFBB stipulated what the classic physique was about, it was a direct hearkening back to the era of the golden era. That was their written, statement on their website.
Absolutely.
But it's absolutely fucking not that, because it's too big. The turnip legs, the conditioning, it's just bodybuilding light. It's a lighter version of bodybuilding with weight caps.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think what's the name of the Brazilian guy? He slipped my
Ramo
mind.
Dino, or whatever his name is.
That's right. Yeah, Dino, Ramon Dino. Sorry. I mean, he's got a great physique, but I can't see it as classic. It definitely doesn't seem to harken back to that era. His placing slipped a bit. Wesley took him out this year, so I don't know if what's going to happen with him. It'll be interesting to see Olympia time. Actually, this is going to be very interesting to watch, and also with Urs, as to whether this is his last hurrah, giving it a crack before he moves to the Open, which we'd like to see.
Yeah, speaking of the Olympia, I thought another interesting clanger was Jay's offside of their manager Matt. And he believed that Hardy Chupin looked unbeatable at the 2023 Arnold Classic. And he mentioned that it would have taken prime Phil Heath or prime Jay Cutler to have beaten that version. No, he did say Jay Cutler, right? I didn't mishear that, because I sort of thought, fuck, what a thing to say when you're sitting right next to Jay Cutler, that Jay Cutler wouldn't beat that version of Hardy.
I know. Yeah, Matt is obviously a very highly skilled IT person, and he set up Jay's studio very well. But you can just see, if you watch occasionally, I love to study body language. You'll see Jay sort of put his finger on his face like that and turn away from Matt, the manager, when he says a few things, and you could just, and there's no poker face either with Jay. It gets a bit cringeworthy, but obviously they get on well.
Not just this episode, but I sort of think that Jay sometimes, not only does he talk over him or override Matt's comments, but sometimes I think Matt should more be like Jamie from Joe Rogan's podcast. Just pull up the fucking information when we need it and just say very little, mate.
Exactly.
I don't know. He looks like a nice guy based on his social media, but I don't want to shoot him by any means. But
no.
Yeah, and it's funny how, like, Danny also mentioned that he's moved now to Las Vegas. Everyone seems to be migrating away from the original one mecca of Gold's Gym in California. It's going to be a ghost town, it sounds, soon. But he's now doing executive protection work for the Las Vegas Raiders and security consulting. So I thought, this guy's got many arrows to his quiver, but he's got his hands in a lot of pies, it seems. And it's good that they're not just putting all their stock and energy into bodybuilding,
That's right. In fact, he almost likened himself, or Jay actually referred to him as like an entrepreneur, a budding entrepreneur, and he's just about being that way. But yeah, this the other thing that he does is he's very highly skilled with guns, and he coaches people how to use guns in their home if they got burgled or if someone was trying to break in. So almost like SWAT team type gun work, and I thought, well, that's interesting. So he's obviously an expert. He's a black belt in martial arts. The guy's very, very talented, isn't he?
Yeah, and if the guns fail, he can always just moonwalk over their ass, and
yeah, that's right. But I will say, as much as I like Danny and all the rest of it, he does like to talk about himself. That's enough about me, and now let's talk more about me, type of thing. But at least he can back it up. There's a lot.
I thought the same thing. It's definitely a quirky personality behind the guy, and
yeah.
Even how he dresses, it's quite showy. He made sure he was flexing those guns hard. Given the company that I was in, I thought I'd be putting those fucking arms away, mate, because you got sit next to Jay Cutler here.
I know. But what I did notice though was that and he actually said he did a bit of workout beforehand just to get a pump for the show. I thought, oh yeah, but it was almost like Sergio Oliver Senior with that shirt. The shirt was unbuttoned, just like and really obviously a size extra small. But by geez, he's still got sensational triceps, hasn't he? Just sitting there. Wow, that's some great genetics. And in fact, Danny did say that it was a bit like Flex Wheeler in that he did the least possible work to get what he did, and the low mileage and all that sort of thing that he spoke of. But I think you called him a pretty interesting cat, didn't you?
Yeah, because obviously when you grow up with these guys, you see them on the magazines, you see them on the covers, and they inspire you through their visuals. But when you hear them talk, sometimes you go, yeah, okay, maybe you should just stay quiet. But like we said, it was a great interview, very interesting, and
it was fantastic.
Good to hear one of from Danny's point of view, being the first classic champion. I thought we could move on now, we'll break it up a little bit with our best YouTube channels. Just to inject a little bit of positivity into our weekly discussions as well. We've probably got these YouTube channels that we never miss each week. And I thought that we could just give our top 5 really quickly, just to give other people maybe a heads up of content that they could be missing and that they should definitely check out.
Oh,
sure. So do you want to give your 5? Because I know that there's some crossover as well. So
yeah, for sure. Look, I think this is a good idea. And, some of these shows, not everybody's potentially watching, but I really enjoy some of these. John Hansen's Bodybuilding Legends podcast. He gets nowhere near the views that he deserves. He is the bodybuilding historian. And as Dave Palumbo keeps going on about, if there's a bodybuilding hall of fame, John needs to be the curator. They're just brilliant interviews with all the great names over the years. So that's a good one. Olympia TV.
We've got over about 300 interviews by that of all guys that are now here, are still here and no longer here as well. Like I said last week, it's an archive that I would even pay to access if it needed to be. But John's brilliant, and his historical knowledge is second to none. He could quote you contest results verbatim, and he's spoken with the best. And the thing I like about John as well is he practiced what he preaches even into his older age as well.
Oh yeah, he looks great. John's fantastic. I was fortunate enough to meet him at the Olympia last year, and we had a bit of a chat. And really nice guy to talk to in person too. So.
It'd be great to get him on the show sometimes. I hope he'll come on.
He'd be amenable to that, I think. So. But I do like Olympia TV. It's quite funny with Tarek Algunde and Chris Cormier. There's another character there. I can't remember his name, but he's got the big deep voice like Bob Ciccarello. He sort of hosts the show. And Tarek Algunde, of course, is a judge, and he's got a really good eye for detail. So it's a good show, and it's a bit lighthearted too. So worth checking out. Hasn't got that many subscribers, surprisingly, but Olympia TV. And then, of course, Ron Harris Muscle. He got canned from Muscular Development, who he worked for Steve Blackman for many years. I've read all of Ron Harris's articles in the magazines over the years. I'm a big fan. But he's really good. And with Giles Thomas, they do a lot of the commentary with the shows. I love their wrap-ups. They're really good. And their power hour just before a show is going to occur, they'll do a bit of a preview of the show, and it's really good. And they have a lot. Ron has a lot of Q&A come in live, which you've been doing with Jamie, and I think that's really quite good. He's very interactive, so
Yeah,
Yeah,
Ron's
really
always been
good.
one of my favorites. He's another guy that's always practiced what he's preached over the years,
Yeah,
and he was
looks
a
good.
long-time natural bodybuilder. Always had his pictures in the early Iron Man magazines. Do you remember him? Had a
Yeah.
great physique, and he's always been very open. And I like him how he's always very humble. He hasn't showed any ego whatsoever over the
Oh, no,
years.
not at all.
He
In fact,
could
he's
be, but
self-deprecating.
yeah, and he's like the antithesis of someone like Dave Palumbo, who it's all about Dave, and he never, like we said last week, he never lets a grudge go. But Ron, as much shit as everyone's always talked about Ron, has always been completely an absolute gentleman. So he's got my respect. He was actually on another one on my top 5 as well. So never miss it.
Yeah, when I went to the Olympia last year, it was a few bucket list things. I actually met Ron Harris too, and commended him on his show. So that was really nice to meet him. Once again, really nice guy to chat with. Then, of course, old Max Marks Muscle, your favourite. Not.
I'm going to question our friendship with this inclusion, but go on.
Yeah, I know. He's a funny man. He does all sorts of impersonations, really weird sort of
fucking cringe.
Really weird narration, which, funnily enough, I want to. But the guy's IT skills are second to none. The comparison pics that he puts up of bodybuilders from yesteryear against bodybuilders today. He does all these hypotheticals as well as current day stuff as well. And his contest wrap-ups with these pictures that he gets and comparisons are brilliant. And he actually knows what he's talking about when it comes to physiques. So old mad Max Marks Muscle, kudos to him. I've been enjoying it. But the other one, of course, is a good old friend of mine from Australia, Xavier Wells, Desktop Bodybuilding. Really good stuff. He's done well in the last few years. His subscriber count is going up. And whenever he does something, it's quality. It's absolute quality.
Maybe there's another champion. And I've been listening to this kid for, I'm sorry to call him a kid. It's just that he got a bit of a kid when I first started listening, because he was right active there, putting his best foot forward and injecting himself into the scene. And he's a great competitor as well. But he was doing it with commentary with Mick Galley back in the day. And man, his podcast just got me through my hellish contest prep back in the day. And he's always kept it going. And he's a family man. He's got kids, and his love of bodybuilding always continues. And again, he's another one of those totally egoless, articulate, intelligent, and gentleman of the sport. And I just love his coverage as well. Yeah.
I mean, he was he had RX Muscle Australia, and he was working with Dave back in the day. But
we won't hold that against him.
No, but that show with Mick Galley, that was really good. That was fantastic. That's obviously Xavier stepped up and has now got his YouTube channel. So he's done well. So kudos to Xavier, and we look for and once again his contest previews and wrap ups. Yeah, probably in the top 2 or 3.
Yeah, second enough.
For sure.
Yeah. Do you have one more, or have you done your 5?
That's 5 for me, my friend.
5. Well, like I said, a bit of a crossover list. I had Xavier, John Hansen, Ron Harris as well. I always, every Monday morning when I first jump up in the morning, get ready for work, I'm listening to the Muscle and Fitness with the DJ Chris and Milos show. I just love it when it's those 3. When they get the guests on, sometimes it's good as well, but I don't just love their banter. There's something about it.
It's good. It's very good.
Yeah. Another one I want to give a shout out to. He does kind of essay-like videos like myself. And when I was watching his stuff, he was one of those guys that inspired me to get into the essay-based videos. But the thing I like about this guy, and his name is Large Coffee, he's done a few videos which have gone really viral, one on Chris Bumstead and a few other ones that have gotten really huge views. He's a bit of a low-key guy. He just does the essay-based videos, but he does them with quality where he does his own narration, because I'm really disliking a lot of these video channels that are coming out recently, and they're just mashups of a bunch of like AI voices that they've narrated over the top, but then just taking like interviews or like little snippets of other videos and piece them together. Because that I'm very particular with this. When I make my essays, I write a narrative that is researched and takes me a long time to write. But I don't just fucking simply mash up a whole heap of other videos and call it my own. And unfortunately, these sort of shit essay videos, they seem to get all the views. But Large Coffee doesn't do that. He scripts all his essays himself, and it's got some excellent production values as well. Second, I like Eugene Teo. He's an Aussie homegrown boy as well, been around in the industry forever. But again, very not an ego-driven guy. He's not arrogant with his knowledge or content like a lot of the other ones. He's not completely flashy, but his content is always just, extremely educational. And I've learned a lot from him over the time.
Yeah.
Cutler Cast, like I say, never miss it. Always fantastic guests. Jay's a great commentator.
It's quality.
And yeah, it's one of those great podcasts that I never neglect. Jeffrey Verity Schofield as well. Very intelligent, natural trainer, always presents training information. And sometimes I think, how much can we keep talking about training? But Jeffrey always manages to put an intelligent, never redundant spin on things in terms of his philosophy of training. And you can learn a lot from him just as a natural, but whether you're geared as well, you can also learn. And I just think, he's another one of those blessings of the Iron game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so that's our there. Yeah, that's good. And having done these Muscle Media Watch shows with your good self, it's been great sort of delving into some of these other YouTubers that I haven't seen before and becoming au fait with them and learning some great stuff and the entertainment as well. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, and one of those channels that maybe that you hadn't come across before, but I've had this guy on as an interview earlier in the year, like last year perhaps, but that's Berger Fagerli, and I think he's Norwegian.
Yes.
And nobody can ever pronounce his name. They always just call him Borg. But he had a great interview. It was a little while back with a Dr. Samuel Buckner, PhD.
Right.
Now, this guy Buckner, he's not the most articulate or interesting guy to listen to based on entertainment value. So that's your warning. If you go into this video, you're not going to be knocked off your socks with Dr. Mike level rhetoric and entertainment presentation. But he is rational, logical, and he's put the science in its proper perspective, minus all the hyperbole. So they really do go through the interview and break down the hypertrophy science in a very explainable way. But like I said, giving science its due when it comes to the muscle growth mechanisms and the research interpretations especially. But what did you think of this one? Because I think you found it quite hard to listen to, right?
Yeah, I struggled with it a little bit. I'm just trying to fit it in with my working week. I listen to these shows quite often on my way to work in the car, so it's a nice sort of a way to kick off my day. But yeah, it was a little bit dry, but still there was a lot of really good facts in there, and these guys really know what they're talking about. So if you're into the science of training and hypertrophy, and you really want to sort of delve into it a little bit more, then it's worth a listen. And they do quote some recent studies. They spoke at length about low volume, high volume training, and about how a lot of the studies on the effectiveness of high volume training are a bit dubious. And I thought that was interesting too, because and they talk about that junk volume as well, which is right up my alley. So that sparked my interest, and I thought, well, here's a couple of guys that know what they're talking about.
What do you define as junk volume though? Because I've heard people talk about, well, isn't Serge Nubray's, 8 sets of 12 that you do for each body part or for each exercise junk volume mostly? But I want to hear people's definition of what junk volume was. So how do you define it?
Well, I would have thought it's you see the guy at the gym that does the same weight for like 7 sets on bench press. I just can't. I'm a bit OCD like that. I can't do the same weight twice. I've seen too many guys do it in the gym, and they never change. Their body stays the same. But I think it's just those extra sets, those superfluous sets that are going to impede on the next exercise. They're going to affect your performance on the exercises to come. So you've only got so much muscle glycogen for your workout. It's gone in under 45 minutes. So you need something left for some of the bigger lifts later on in your workout, particularly.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know, I hear what you're saying, but say for example, like the Serge Nubray video that I did a while back, and that his program would be almost antithetical to someone like Dorian's because it's pump training, it's volume training. And if you have a look at a lot of the bodybuilders over the years, that's the kind of training that they use. Very short rest periods. Guys like, say, Dexter, Flex Wheeler, I know they're genetically blessed and they're using drugs as well. But the thing is, and I don't subscribe to Dorian's quote, which we'll discuss a little bit later, where, if you have a stick of dynamite and you hit it with a pencil 100 times, the dynamite's not going to explode. But if you hit it once with a hammer, it's going to, number one, it's a fucking stupid analogy because we're completely discussing two different things here.
I've heard that.
Muscle doesn't work like that, right? Because there's more than one way to skin a cat when it comes to bodybuilding. As bodybuilding history has conclusively shown us, yes, you could do HIT, but if that's not your predisposition, you can also get there with repeated large amounts of volume.
Yep.
So, you know, you have a look at someone that just does solely calisthenics, where they're doing set after set after dips and chin-ups. They have some pretty fucking outrageous backs. I'm pretty sure that gymnasts don't go to failure, but look at their biceps and their shoulders.
Like
so look at cyclists, how they're just cycling all along. Their fucking calves are tremendous. Yeah. So volume definitely is a component.
That's right. I mean, like, I've just, sorry to interrupt you, but the Olympic rowers, how about some of the backs on the Olympic rowers?
Swimmers in their shoulders and their chests.
That's super high volume. So, yeah, you know.
Yeah. Even the cyclists, a lot of them have legs. They might not have Mr. Olympia caliber legs, but, you know, what I'm arguing is that there's no just kind of one way to roam. There's lots of different variables that we have to take into account. I think that's what these guys are also trying to say, because a lot of the dogma at the moment is that you should just stick to low reps, you know, sets of 5 to 8. But then these guys were sort of saying, well, high reps have always worked for people as well. And why would we just discount them all of a sudden because the so-called science is saying one thing? Now, Jamie's always says that science has no place in bodybuilding, and I'm not sure I totally agree with that as well. Yes, there's a lot of issues with the way that science is interpreted and run in these studies, which these guys definitely hammer on. But he says that, you know, when I'll take a direct quote, he says, when a coach like yourself does things, it's a form of science. You employ things, you collect metrics, you look at the data, you make changes. Is that not science? But I liked another quote that he says that science can give you principles, it can give you ideas, but science will never perfectly answer the hypertrophy question. So I thought that was also pretty good too. Yeah. And he also put like these qualifications that a lot of guys like Lane Norton and these other little pricks like, you know, Mike Isotao and this Milo Wolf at the moment that are flouting their credentials to the PhD. It's the classic fallacy of, you know, appealing to authority. They're saying, I'm a scientist, I have a PhD, I have all this knowledge. So they're overvaluing that, and they're undervaluing the experience of a lot of coaches and individuals who've worked with a lot of other people. But he was saying that if you're a PhD, you should have the most humility and probably speak with the least authority, or at least the most skepticism. And a lot of these guys are not doing that at all. They're taking one tiny minutiae of science that they've extrapolated from a shit research study and saying this is the absolute new way that we should all be training. And they're using that as, you know, their authority in the online space, and it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, they did talk about the two things that are really necessary for muscle hypertrophy, and that's the actual mechanism. So obviously the mechanics of the movement that you're performing, and we've spoken about that, you know, at length on our shows with Faz Lift's progression criteria, and you know the so-called mind in the muscle and all that sort of caper. And then muscle damage was the other thing that's necessary. That they believe for hypertrophy, and so how you get that obviously can vary, and that's when that little the conversations about high volume versus low volume, high load versus low load training.
And I like the comment about volume because I'm like yourself. I probably try to approach this with a level of rationality. Let's start at the lowest number of sets, which is 1. Now, if 1 doesn't work after a while, and you've given it a honest intensity application, then add another one. But don't go adding like the problem I've always had with bodybuilding recommendations, especially programming, is I do 4 sets of 12. So for example, well, why 4 sets? Why not 3? Why not 5? Why 12? Why not 8? Why not 20? So basically, I like how they said that these calculations often reduce physiology to a maths equation, and that's problematic. Yeah, and just because you can recover and do more volume, it doesn't guarantee that you're actually going to grow more anyway. So fucking ease up on the volume.
That's right. Yeah, and they did speak about, you know, the importance of individualizing these sorts of programs, and I thought that was, you know, that was good too, you know.
Yeah, or even like if you are going to do a lot of volume, disperse that volume over a variety of movements. And if you ever like look at someone like, say, Charles Glass, he does a lot of that with all the variety of angles that a lot of people criticize him for. But he, you know, you won't ever see him doing 6 sets of bench press, for example. He'll cut that across a whole bunch of different movements.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the other thing they said, Sean, was I think I've got it right, and they were saying that, you know, if you're doing lower volume, you know, higher load type training, that you could periodize that against, perhaps higher volume training. So, you could sort of go from one to the other, I suppose. So
that's exactly what I do. And I think that's getting the best of both worlds as well, because you never get stale and burnt out. And it's not being dug. Yeah, you give because the thing is with Dorian's type training, and everyone that does that, it ultimately kind of destroys them after a while if they can't temper that, if they're going for those real heavy lifts. Look at Dorian. He's going in for another hip replacement pretty soon. He was done by his mid-30s. He can't ever lift heavy weights again. And that speaks volumes for, pardon the pun, for the application of his dogmatic adherence to intensity. You just got to know when to back off.
Yeah, and that's something he recognises. And but even for myself, I think I should every 6 to 8 weeks try a little bit of high volume for 2 or 3 weeks. It's something that I wouldn't mind. Having listened to this particular show, this particular podcast, I think it would be a good thing to give a go myself. So I'm not averse to it.
And just like one other quote that I really like that did come from the guy in regards to, say, learning. He says, you never stop learning to be right so much that he likes to be proven wrong, because you honestly learn more when you're wrong. And I think that bodybuilding teaches us that lesson sometimes all too late, because when our training teaches us that we're wrong in our application of it and we get injured or we get messed up with whatever we're doing, sometimes it's too late to turn that around and go the other direction. So it's best to be preemptive about that, listening to the body, be more intuitive. We were going to talk about our worst, outrageous, crazy fucking tragedy of haircuts and hairdos that we've seen over the time, inspired by this pic recently of Urs Kalinsky, touting his new Goku hairstyle.
That's right.
It looks fucking terrible. And Urs, I've got to say that what is the guy's 25, and looking at that picture, he looks 55. So whatever he's doing, he needs to back it off, because he looks outrageous. But I was thinking, funnily enough, it's not so much Goku that he looks like, that anime figure, that I don't know. That whole anime craze that skipped our generations, didn't it, mate? I've got no resonance or identification with any of those anime characters. When the young kids go on about them, like, oh, fucking,
Super Saiyan
time or Super Saiyan, I have no idea what they're talking about, and I don't fucking know.
No, it's I don't know what he's trying to do there, but
but I thought he'd look more like the guy on the right than the guy on the left any day. So the Führer would be proud, but
yes, well, he definitely he looks very Aryan, doesn't he? That's for sure. But,
absolutely,
I'm a fan of Urz's physique, definitely, and I'd love to see him in the open, but there's too much hair there, I'm afraid, and I'll talk about that in a moment.
He's definitely not the blonde myth, that's for certain.
Yeah.
But let's do a walkthrough time of some of our worst haircuts here, and if you've got any, throw them in the comments, because we might have missed some from the tragedy that's about to unfold. The Barbarian brothers, I don't even think it was their real hair at the end of the day. It was a wig that they had, or hair attachments that had to add on. They probably would have looked better bald, but definitely iconic hair. This guy on the right, his name escapes me now, but
yeah, it's definitely escaped me, but I do remember the face. But man, look at that hair! Wow, I wonder if that's real.
I just don't think long hair in bodybuilding just go together at all.
Well, I've always said, when you get on stage, smaller head, bigger body. But also in bodybuilding, and I've spoken about this with the beard spectre lately, that you really need to see your neck. You need to see the neck. That once the neck is apparent, then the shoulders can look wider. So if you can't see your neck properly, then the shoulders can look narrower. So it really can upset your symmetry with the long beard or long hair. You've got to be able to realize that the smaller head, the bigger body, you need to see your neck so that we can get nice shoulder width. And that's the biggest problem, I think.
Yes, the beard keeps me warm though during the winter, and I can't be fuck shaving it.
That's all right. But on stage,
moving on. Yeah, like you said, smaller head, bigger body, but the afro definitely throws off that symmetry.
I know.
As shown here by Charles Glass, and none other than the Robbie Robinsons.
Go through there. Yeah.
So pretty awful. Another tragedy is
The
the
mullet.
mullet, the appearance of the mullet. And as you can see, Mike here is very thin in the front and
That's right.
on the crown, but he was compensating with the mullet and the long hair on the sides, but his hair was awful, wasn't it?
I mean, what do they say? All business on the top and party on the back, or something. But yeah. Unfortunately, Mike, it's detracting from your symmetry. And Mike had a fantastic upper body. I mean, talk about one of the best back double biceps ever. Mike Quinn. Wow. Yeah, he was.
Yeah, probably suited more his insane personality at the time because he was a bit of a wild child back in the day.
Oh, he was. Yeah. He had a few issues.
Again with the mullet with Dorian, he rocked that mullet hard in the early 90s, didn't he?
He did, but I'm so glad when he cut it short for the '93 Olympia, and we know what happened with his body. I mean, it was a twofold thing, wasn't it? Got rid of the mullet, and then they added 20 pounds to his physique. Yeah, so
he went super saiyan.
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing, how he kind of kept his hair all through that as well, because he was one of those guys. Well, it seemed like a lot of the guys in the earlier days definitely all kept their hair, and then by about the mid 90s to late 90s, you started to see the ball bodybuilders emerge. You had Kevin suddenly lose their hair, Sean lose their hair, Flex Wheeler lost his hair, Cormier, I think Cormier kept his, but practically all the white bodybuilders were going bald as well. But Aaron Baker had some pretty tragic looks throughout his time as well. Old Batman there with the flat top.
He's a guy he's a guy that should have placed higher in some contests, I believe. And and what about his back double biceps, Sean? Wasn't that a cracker?
Fantastic. But he definitely wasn't getting a look in after that WBF debacle. So they were definitely punishing him, and that's some time when politics definitely entered the equation.
But he had some wacky hairstyles, and this was tragic.
Speaking of wacky hairstyles,
I reckon they were hair extensions. I could be wrong, but I think they were stapled on.
It was also my theory that he wore that hair because it took away attention from the absolute tragedy of the physique for that year. Because, Lee always used to, regardless of his 280 to 300 pound off seasons, always to come in, spotlessly sharp when he dieted down. Yep. But I think by then his heart wasn't in it anymore, and that physique that he presented on stage definitely showed that he still had another 12 weeks to go by that point.
Yeah, and what it was with Lee, you could see the upper body was pretty damn good, but it was the glutes and the quads.
Awful. And the back was so watery.
Yeah, that's right. Be very watered down and soft. There was body fat still there, but it could have been trying to detract the tension away from that. But that was one that sprung to mind when we were talking about these crazy hairdos. Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
and we're going to put it to this. I put it to you earlier. Did you know this guy? I remember seeing this tragedy of a hairstyle in the magazines because it's one of those with the combination of the little short denim Daisy Dukes there. It really is, the whole kit and caboodle. But he was a Filipino bodybuilder back in the day, and as it says in that little caption, this guy's got appeal written all over him. And I had to search up his name, but he was Romeo Villarino, a Filipino bodybuilder. Right. And in this one, again, once he had the haircut there,
it looks good.
The physique actually looked like it come all together there. It's a great side chest.
Yeah, I think my good friend Paul De Campo, who's a great Filipino bodybuilder in Perth, he would know of Romeo for sure.
Some great Filipino bodybuilders, like the guys in the gyms over there, even though it's very third world and very basic and the food is atrocious, some of these Filipino boys really know how to put it together. Just look at Jeremy Bundia and all of those early classic physique guys.
Well,
fantastic.
Once again, these guys have got the small joints. They've got the tiny little joints. They've got the good muscle bellies, and they know to pose too. Oh, here we go. Look at this.
I forgot these two. I was going to shut it down. I thought, hang on, we saved the worst for last. And I think it's a dead heat ringer for Mike Katz's comb over in Pumping Iron, and combined with this. I don't know what this fucking guy on the right is thinking. This Stu Phillips or whatever it is, Disco Stew or Beef Stew or whatever he calls himself. Besides the ridiculous name, the hair is just. It's what the fuck's he thinking?
Yeah, well, like I said, it's the antithesis of smaller head, bigger body. He could look he could look a damn sight better if he just cut that short. People are saying that no, Stu, leave it. It suits you and all that sort of thing. And it is a pretty cool cat look, I suppose, but it's definitely not going to. It's not enhancing his symmetry the way he looks on stage. It could look a lot better. And Yeah, Mike Katz, that's like the Donald Trump hairstyle with less hair, isn't it? And he was a bit off season there, I'm afraid, wasn't he, Sean?
Well, I think he went fully natty after a stretch there. And looking at that
Yeah,
physique, because I think that's when they were posing. All the bodybuilders were posing at the premiere of Pumping Iron.
that's right.
For quite a while, they had them all doing those. Even Mike Mensa was in that. So yeah, I think I could fully believe that Mike was natty there.
Yeah,
But yeah. So, like I said, if you've got any other ones that we missed there, throw them in the comments, and we'll be happy to maybe include them again down the road for another run at that. We'll get into one of our other discussions, which was, like I said last week, we seem to be having Dorian making regular appearances. And it's quite funny because Dorian probably says more in a month now than he ever said in his whole entire time as a professional bodybuilder. You never heard him mutter, half a dozen words before. But now he's almost like the verbose shadow. He says quite a lot. And he had the health expert, Dr. Peter Attia, who's a big name in the health space. And they talked about the concept of the centenarian decathlon. He's got a book called Outlive. I read it before. It's kind of interesting. But he says that by the age of 80 or 100 or whatever, obviously if it's a centenarian, must be 100. But he has a list of physical tasks and activities that he said that that you should be able to train for in order to extend your longevity and quality of life in older age. And that's things like being able to deadlift your body weight, carry heavy objects, get off the floor, etc., and improve your VO2 max.
VO2 max.
What did you think of this interview with Dorian anyway?
It was quite good. I did enjoy it. If Peter Attia mentions Medicine 2.0 and Medicine 3.0 one more time, I think I lose my mind. But there was some good, banter.
Yeah.
There was some good banter about those, because Medicine 2.0 did actually increase people's lifespans hugely. Over a period of about 100 years. People many years ago were only living to about 40 years of age, and all of a sudden, with Medicine 2.0, that basically mortality became into the mid to late 70s and now 80s. But the thing that Peter spoke about, and Dorian as well, you can see Dorian's been a little bit disillusioned with Medicine 3.0, and that is the treatment of chronic ailments that doesn't seem to be that flash these days. So
he said it focuses more on prevention and lifestyle factors like nutrition, exercise, sleep, and mental health, and that's what medicine doesn't cover. It's very reactive and very prescriptive with medications. It's still stuck in that antiquated mindset of treating the disease and the symptomology, but never doing anything to prevent it in the first place.
Yeah, not going for that. And quite often the cure can be in, what you're eating and your lifestyle. But they both were saying that that medical practitioners, especially GPs, the amount of nutrition that they studied was like in an afternoon. It was really just non-existent in their degree, and that's quite often where the cure can come from.
Yeah, and like a couple of quotes that I pulled from the interview, he says that being unfit carries with it more risks than smoking, which is a huge statement when you think about it. And this was another cracker that he also thought about in regards to exercise, and why a discussion with Dorian was good was because he says that elder age sarcopenia, which is muscle loss, is the harbinger of death. And this is the thing that's coming to kill all of us. So it's vital that we maintain for longevity our cardio fitness, which is our VO2 max, and obviously also our muscle mass as we age. And it's kind of funny because, health and bodybuilding progress, they're inextricably linked as we get older. So when we're younger, we can redline our machine and we can get away with some body abuse, and yet we can still make progress, even though we're doing damage to our body. But you got to pay that damage bill on the back end. And as you get older, you only make progress, I find, if your health markers are all optimized or at least in check. Do you find the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So my own training is definitely about, obviously maintaining the muscle that I've got and maybe improving a little bit, but it's definitely more focused on health and longevity now. And I realize the importance of hanging on to my muscle mass as I get older, because it can actually be important for cognitive function too. And as we all know, your muscle mass is a metabolic dump. So, it's going to really help you stay a bit leaner as you get older too. But, quite often people in aged care homes they die from falls and things like that. The frailty is a real problem. And so, it's really important that we do hang on to our muscle mass. But I've definitely changed the way I eat too. They spoke in this particular podcast about intermittent fasting a little bit, where there's a place for it, obviously for health, but maybe not for supreme hypertrophy. But so that was quite good, that little bit. But
yeah, well, I think when it comes to the fasting, especially prolonged fasting, because sometimes I don't know whether intermittent fasting actually cuts it in terms of this particular effect. But Peter Attia mentioned the visceral fat, which is the fat in the liver. It's the fat within the muscle and the fat around the heart and the pancreas. And he said that that's the fat that's going to kill you at the end of the day. So when you're doing like prolonged periods of fasting, that's the type of fat that your body targets for basically getting rid of. And yeah, like you said, it's more about as you age, targeting your nutrition, not so much, for muscle development, but for longevity, so.
And they do say that as you age, your protein requirements should go up. So there's no reason why you can't. Yeah. So a lot of them, there's been a lot of studies to show how the importance of protein as you get older. So that's actually good to hear. As long as you're not, consuming 600 grams a day, of course, that would be inflammatory. But it's still something that, if you're looking after your nutrition that way and you're working out at the gym, 3-4 times.
Do you even know your VO2 max?
No, I don't. No, that's. I used to do interval sprints a few years ago, and I got sort of a bit tired of it. I prefer to walk. I prefer the low intensity, steady state walking. I just find that really, really, really good for my overall health and mental health.
Yeah, so Attia's recommendations, if we could just break them down, he recommends, training for the Centurion decathlon of optimizing your longevity. And I like how Dorian pulled Peter up and he goes, I don't really like the phrase anti-aging because he said it's silly. It's because we're all going to age, but let's age better. Right, and he also mentioned about, change. You got to know when to change lanes in life because, what was appropriate at some point might not be appropriate at another point as you get older. So that's quite wise thinking there from Dorian. Never forgetting that he was basically forced to make those lane changes, but still, at least it's good that he still recognized it and got off the partying binge at least. But so Attia's prescription for those that don't have time to listen to the podcast, he suggests a minimum of 3 hours per week of focus training. So he breaks it down to 1 hour of zone 2 cardio, 1 hour of strength training, and 20 to 30 minutes per week at high intensity, which is your VO2 max training, and also including at least 30 minutes of stability or mobility work. So it's quite a big prescription, but 3 hours a week, it's doable.
It's doable,
and it's quite balanced as well.
It was good generalized advice for sure. And Peter's good to listen to. I found him, and in particular, I like listening to Dorian. But it soon, the whole thing soon switched, though, Sean, to Peter interviewing Dorian about, because
every guest does this to Dorian.
It was obvious that Peter was a bit of a fan of Dorian's, and then so Peter's asking about his tricep and about this and that, and then they soon got into discussion about who was the greatest bodybuilder to not win the Olympia, and so some of that was actually quite good. So it had a bit for everybody, this particular podcast. So Dorian's doing quite well with his shadow talk, isn't he?
Yeah. Again, it's one of those ones that I never fail to listen to. I think he only puts out one a month.
That's right.
He said he's going up for hip surgery pretty soon. So again, it shows that just how fucking banged up Dorian was from that training. Even 30 years later, he's still paying for that off the back end. But, it's not like he's been doing heavy weight training for the last 20 years or anything. But,
No, just a lot of cycling down.
Yeah, hopefully they do that part 2 that they were talking about, because he actually said that he had a lot of questions about the mental health side of things, which would have been really interesting to listen to. So hopefully they pick that back up again in the future.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting for sure. Yeah, looking at being mindful and addressing mental health issues. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just to touch on our last topic for the week, we were going to use this one as something like our individual picks, because you listened to something and I read something, and we're going to present that very quickly, or just of our own accord. So what was your pick for this week?
Well, your favorite Max Marks Muscle talked about the People's Choice winners at the Olympia, which started in 2018, the People's Choice. And, you've got to go to, like, let's say the recent Gold Logies. Sometimes the People's Choice can be just a bit of a joke. Tragic. Completely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not into People's Choice Awards at all. Like I said to you in my rants.
No, I agree.
Fuck, it's just it's like all the popular high school kids getting together, voting the most popular kid at school. It's not usually the one you want.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And the gold Logie wing over the years that's been a case in point. But if we look at the Olympia, it's actually not been too bad. In 2018, Rolly Winkler won that. Yeah, but I watched that Olympia live, and Rolly had really improved his waist massively, and he was in the best shape he's ever been in for Rolly, and was an absolute marvel of muscle. He came third in the contest, and Phil Heath was just starting to get the distended gut then, and I thought what Rolly could have snuck into second place. That was the year Sean Roden beat Phil Heath. And so that was a very exciting Olympia. And I really do believe that Rolly, I thought Rolly looked very good there. And it didn't.
Do you think Roden should have won that one just as an offside?
Yes, absolutely.
A lot of controversy because even Honey Rumbert said there's no fucking way that Sean Roden should have won it.
Well, Honey's bound to say that, being Phil's coach and best friend. But no, definitely not. I remember breaking that down. I did a review of the show, and I really broke it down. And no, Sean was the deserved winner in my humble opinion. But Rolly, so that was interesting. And then in 2019, that was the year that Brandon Curry won. And he looked fantastic, Brandon Curry. He went to Dubai, didn't he? Was trained by Buddy Badu and all those and made some inroads. But then what happened in that year, that was probably one of Hardy Chupin's best looks ever. He looked incredible. His waist was small. And so Hardy Chupin got the People's Choice Award that year. And he came third. I believe William Boyack was second in 2019. So that was interesting. And so those two People's Choice winners were probably, I think you could go along with it. And then in 2020, of course, Big Ramy. He made that statement at the press conference to Bob Ciccarello. He said, "Winter is coming." He was talking about
that was
himself.
So fucking cringe, Craig. I can't believe that you managed to pick on every cringe thing and hold it up and celebrate it. And I just think, fuck, but just go on because this is fucking tearing my heart out.
And,
go on.
And he wasn't he coached by the Chad Nichols at the time. Chad Nichols was coaching him.
Dr. Death,
Dr. Death. But in 2020,
look at him these days. Look at Ramy now. No one even knows if he's alive anymore.
Well, his physique's falling apart. Yeah, but he won the Olympia, and he deservedly won the Olympia. I thought he looked great. One of the best side chests I've ever seen, with that leg that looked like belonged to a sort of a rhino. It was massive. But he also won People's Choice in 2020. So interesting. 2021, Hardy Chupin got it again. He was third that year, and he won the People's Choice. And then, of course, 2022, my favourite, Nick Walker, who was third in that contest behind Hardy, won it in 2022. Derek was second, and Nick Walker was People's Choice. And Nick Walker was in outstanding condition, and oodles of muscle, and in fact from the back was definitely a lot better than Hardy. Hardy won that show and his back was completely watered down and still had body fat there. It was one of the worst back double biceps you've ever seen on a Mr. Olympia winner ever in 2022, whereas Nick Walker's back double bicep was a showstopper. So that was a deserved People's Choice win there, I thought, in 2022. And then last year, Derek Lunsford was the People's Choice winner and won the show. So it's been quite interesting. And so I'm just curious really now as to who's going to pick it up this year. It's pretty hard.
Interesting that Derek won it because he's so unpopular with everybody. If you gauge the comments on social media by any marker of people's opinion on things, because you can't stand him apparently. And I don't know, he seems like a nice guy to me.
Yeah, he does to me. He's very wholesome and all that, very family orientated and quite a religious man. I don't know. Yeah, so the People's Choice, I know you find it a bit cringeworthy, my friend, but
it's fucking awful.
But at the Olympia level, I think it's been pretty close to the mark. And I've got to say, the belt that they win, a la sort of the wrestling federations, that belt is a beauty. The People's Choice belt, I love that. I think that would look good in my office, one of those, with all my other junk that I've got. Yeah, so So there
Well,
you
if
go.
you hang around long enough, you'll probably find Nick Walker's belt fucking on eBay for sale, because after that,
Oh yeah, I'll make a bit
the
on
guy's
that.
probably going to kick off in a few years. He's not going to be with the land of the living for much longer, the way he's going. So you know, you'll be able to pick it up for a steal.
But I believe your pick is a lot more of a lot more quality than mine. So go right ahead.
It's always debatable. You can never tell with people's choice, because, you know, if you were to go by social media with people's choices and say, for example, YouTube, because that gives you the court of public opinion of what's popular and what's not. You have a quality channel like Ron Harris, who is a skilled commentator, neck deep in the trenches all those years with magazine articles, multiple competition appearances, built a physique, knows everybody and everything about the business. But then you've got fucking Nick Onions, who's done fucking nothing, and he's got like one of the biggest YouTube channels, you know, on the planet. So there you go. That personifies and epitomizes the so-called people's choice. But I will move into my pick of the week, and mine isn't a video, because I saw this book years ago and never bothered picking it up because I just thought the cover looks trash. And I was just saying to Craig earlier that they couldn't use any of the IFBB licensed material to put an actual bodybuilder on the cover. And it was released back in 2003, I think aimed more at the British demographic, because it's a British journalist that wrote this. So it has a lot of British flavor and, I don't know, kind of more sensibility in terms of its writing style, which I really enjoyed. But I never picked it up back in the day. So I've only just picked it up, you know, so late in the piece. But it kind of comes down to providing an inside look at the world of professional bodybuilding and focusing on the era of the freak in the early 2000s, when bodybuilders were just beginning to really push the limits of muscle mass. What I really liked about the book is he spends a lot of time, in particular, with Kerry Kays, who was Dorian Yates's business partner. And he actually spends a lot of time with Dorian Yates as well. And he presents this outside journalist fly on the wall account of bodybuilding from an outsider's point of view. So it's just a really well-written, good, interesting take. There's chapters on Andreas Munz's death. There's whole chapters on Dorian.
Yeah.
One thing that I did pick up that I didn't realize, or probably didn't recall, was that Dorian in 93 didn't even get a call out for the muscularity round. Did you realize that, Craig? That's how good he was. They didn't even call him out for fucking muscularity round.
I do remember one year something like that going on, but I couldn't remember that it was.
Probably could have been any other year besides 93, because that was when obviously Dorian was at his best.
Yeah, that's right.
And I had a quote from Dorian in the book. It had Dorian saying that he thought that he was either first or last. And he goes, and I knew I wasn't fucking last.
Yeah, no, there was what a sensational anecdote that is.
Yeah, I mean, and another description that I thought that you would have really appreciated that I've extracted here, because I just sort of thought, yeah, this gives you a kind of a quality of the flavor of the writing and how it's written, and the guy uses good metaphors and examples. He said, for Dorian Yates, he was able to build a body that made Mike Mentz's look like a school project that was abandoned halfway through lack of interest.
Oh, that's a bit harsh.
Because he was mentioning that Mike Mentzer was Dorian's inspiration for getting into and building that kind of physique, that kind of training style. But then he says that about.
Well, that's a killer quote.
Yeah.
I've actually got Mike Mentzer on my office wall with that photo where he's standing on the beach, relaxed. I was a big fan of Mike Mentzer's physique. He was a ripper. But
anyway, the book goes through like the history of the bodybuilding from the early pioneers of Eugene Sandow. It's got a whole chapter on Arnold and pumping iron. What I really liked about it as well is it goes into a lot of depth about Wayne DeMilla and his behind the scenes business relations, or, you know, promoting the Olympia. Peter McGough gets a fair amount of mention as well. A lot of facts about Peter that I never knew. But it also tracks and follows several of the top bodybuilders of that time, particularly Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, Gunter, as they competed for that Olympia title around about the time. And one of the things that I wanted to make a bit of an amendment, because I mentioned in my Robbie Robinson video recently that none of the other black bodybuilders from that period had made claims of racism. However, in this book, it actually had two, because one of them was Paul Gillette. He said that the judges always favored against the black guys, but it also had another quote from Paul saying that he had a bigger, weirder contract than Dorian. So the author was basically saying, well, how's that fucking racism then, mate? Which was a fair call. The other one that I never realized and didn't pick up at the time, because Ronnie Coleman, remember how at the press conference he always says, "Why complain? You know, I never complained. Why complain?" That was his stupid fucking retort to some very valid criticism for Kevin and Sean that year. But Ronnie Coleman, was coming out and complaining against racism the time that he lost to Gunther Schlierkamp. Now, it had some direct quotes from Wayne DeMilia in this part, and Wayne's reply to Ronnie was, "What you've got to realize, Ronnie, is that in 98, 99, you had the best proportions that you could for your frame at that time." He says, "Your muscles have gotten bigger, but just because you're bigger doesn't make you better. And the other thing is that your age has also affected your physique in some way." And I think that was a nice way of saying you're using too much for too long, the fucking drugs, because that blew out Ronnie's physique more than anything.
Well, that's right. I mean, Ronnie looked magnificent in 98, 99, and if the waist and the abs started to separate, didn't they? Into the 2000s. But
I think they also made the comment that it looked like that Ronnie had swallowed like half a child or something in his stomach. It was that obvious and looked terrible. But Wayne DeMilia basically said that Gunther beat him and beat him decisively. And he goes, and the thing I expected to happen, of course, is watch every time a white guy beats a black guy, oh, it's racial. So, he says now the judges have a problem. So, like, say, for example, Jay was white and Gunther's blonde and white. What are they got to do? If the judges go that way, Ronnie's going to win because they've got to split the white. And he says that he knew that Ronnie was only kidding himself if he thought that he had lost because he was black. He was also black in all the shows that he had won too.
Oh, yes. So it was a little bit disappointing to hear that. But Gunther Schlierkamp, I remember seeing all the pictures and at the time, and Gunther was just amazing. That was his perfect peak, wasn't it? His perfect peak of all time.
One and only,
one and only, and he looked magnificent. He always looked good. And he still looks good to this day, Gunther Schlierkamp. So, he was definitely, he had that diamond smile, didn't he? And good looks and great physique and great personality too. But and I love Ronnie, but a little bit disappointing to hear sound grapes over that decision, because I would agree with Wayne DeMilia on that occasion for sure.
Yeah. So it's an interesting book. I know you can pick it up on Amazon just through an ebook if you are interested. It was a book that I completely dismissed and neglected over the years, and I'm glad that I went back and checked into it, because it really does offer that well-written outsiders flavor, that, like I said, that fly on the wall look at professional bodybuilding in a time that I don't think a lot of print was actually dedicated to it, because there was no real big documentaries of the early 2000s era, and a lot of those stories have probably gone by the wayside. And this guy really captures it with some very astute observation and some very insider interviews. So it's a great book that I really recommend.
Yeah, well done, Sean. I always love your book reviews, even though, unfortunately, I'm not a book reader myself. I'm an audiovisual person. But I do enjoy your reviews because it saves me reading the book. But I am looking forward to more of your book reviews on this show. Yes, and I think you should, because you are a very talented person when it comes to doing reviews. And as on Card Data Stone, your mantra is truth, news, and reviews. So it doesn't have to be all video stuff, does it?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we also want to dive into with our own review next week is a look at the John Jewett website, because we're Muscle Media reviewing here, so we're going not only just the YouTube videos but books, films. We've got that Craig Titus new movie that's just dropped, and we're going to check that as well and let you know our thoughts. I get a bit like squeamish when I think of when media capitalizes that and focuses on not glorifying, but
I know, it's
putting these wankers up there, and
I know.
that chick, or whatever kind of black humor you might have regarding it, she lost her life.
I know.
Because of the selfishness of these two lunatics, but now they're forever immortalized on film in a production. And Kelly's free and laughing, and I don't know if Craig will ever fucking get out, but Craig, I definitely believe, took the fall for her. And at the end of the day, they're still drawing breath.
Yeah, the ethics are not there, so it's unfortunately it does make for interesting viewing, even though the ethics are probably out the window. But I wouldn't mind watching that and then perhaps having a chat about it with your good self.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think we're pretty much on time, so it's great to join and discuss and recap all these things with you each week. It's we get a
I love
lot
it.
out of it, so hopefully the people who are watching this also do. So, you know, throw us a comment, put any things that you might want to see us touch on, or any channels that we might have missed, and things that you might like that you want us to have a look at and give our thoughts on, because that's what we're here for.
Yeah, we always like interjecting with the comments on your channel. So yeah, they're more than welcome, and I just enjoy our chin wags each week. It's great fun.
Yeah, and you know, there's another great interview that I did yesterday with the iconic Brian Moss. He was one of the photographers, because we touched on the topic of iconic photographs last week, and we featured a few of our favorite photos. But I do the same thing with the interview with Brian this week. Is I picked out a handful of my favorite photos of Brian's and asked him if he could give just some backstory, some production notes, also just some visual narrative of what the story behind the photo was. And that was my favorite part of the interview with Brian, and he was just a wealth of stories and knowledge as well about the sport. So check that out if you haven't already too.
Yeah, well done on acquiring Brian there. That was a great interview, and you know, we look forward to more of those. So good stuff.